Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, is perhaps the most important speech delivered by a Canadian Prime Minister this century, but not for the reasons you might be thinking. In his speech, Mark Carney, while citing Thucydides and Václav Havel, sets out a hyper-realist foreign policy. He articulates that the post-World War II order is dead, that middle powers are stuck playing a game that no longer exists, and that we are in the midst of a great power struggle.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. And this aphorism of Thucydides is presented as inevitable, as the natural logic of international relations reasserting itself. And faced with this logic, there is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. So what are our options? In 1978, the Czech dissident Václav Havel, later president, wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless. And in it, he asked a simple question: how did the communist system sustain itself? And his answer began with a greengrocer. Every morning, this shopkeeper places a sign in his window: "Workers of the world unite." He doesn't believe it. No one does. But he places the sign anyway to avoid trouble, to signal compliance, to get along. And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists. Not through violence alone, but through the participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false. Havel called this living within a lie. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down.
He says that middle powers need to get with the program and stop mourning the loss of the old order. That, quote, nostalgia is not a strategy.
We understand that this rupture calls for more than adaptation. It calls for honesty about the world as it is. We are taking the sign out of the window. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. This is the task of the middle powers. The countries that have the most to lose from a world of fortresses and the most to gain from genuine cooperation.
He plainly states that mutual cooperation with great powers is a lie, one that has been used against middle powers to make them subordinate.
You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
Carney describes the difference between performative sovereignty and real sovereignty. He urges fellow middle powers to follow Canada's lead in navigating this great power struggle.
We negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon. We negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. In a world of great power rivalry, the countries in between have a choice: compete with each other for favor, or to combine to create a third path with impact. We shouldn't allow the rise of hard power to blind us to the fact that the power of legitimacy, integrity, and rules will remain strong if we choose to wield them together.
He then turns his direction to the United States. He says that Canada's bargain with the United States, one that we have relied on for decades to protect our interests, our economy, and to be a force for collective good, is over.
We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals. And we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works.
He then goes on to correctly point out that these great powers, in particular China and the United States, have been using economic integration as, quote, weapons and tariffs as leverage.
But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited.
If you listen closely to the full, nearly 20-minute speech, Mark Carney justifies his new controversial trade deals with China and Qatar. Trade deals that Canada must sign, not ones that we would want to sign. In Carney's words, it essentially means playing the hand that we have been dealt, not the one we wish we had. Now, it is deeply ironic that Mark Carney's most important speech about Canada and her place in the world was delivered at the World Economic Forum in front of the world's elite. An audience that only Mark Carney could possibly relate to. A group of people in that crowd who could not possibly be further away from the average Canadian. Carney is not an orator. He is not a retail politician. Quite frankly, most of his speeches to date have made for tough listening. But this was different. He spoke entirely in English, delivering a clear and concise diagnosis of the world as it is, receiving a standing ovation from the world elite in attendance, and a speech that will be quoted endlessly in the international press. According to the New York Times, Mark Carney personally wrote this entire speech. But let's be real about this also. This speech will not solve Canada's problems at home. It won't be able to put food on the tables of the growing number of Canadians going hungry tonight. It won't stop out-of-control crime in our streets. And it certainly won't reopen the hundreds of closed auto plants, steel factories, and lumber mills that are dotting the Canadian landscape like gravestones. But for the first time in my lifetime, I have listened to a Canadian Prime Minister place our country as a leader of the world's middle powers. I have listened to a clear and concise plan for Canadian foreign policy. And I can actually understand the direction that my country is now going in. All eyes now will be focused on Canada's official opposition and Pierre Poilievre. How will Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party present us with an alternative and more attractive plan for Canada in this uncertain and dangerous world? I suspect we will all soon find out. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please like this video, share it with your networks, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching.